yourself that you are true Calvinist because you have persevered to the end. Few people have indicated they can't come because of conflicting engagements. So that is a sin, but it's a forgivable sin. Okay? Yeah, before I get started, I might just give a book talk. Books on Thomas Aquinas, Legend. I thought I would just recommend a very simple book, Edward Feser. The title, some more the beginner's guide, you know, it says, seems like very simple. He's a clear writer. I told somebody he's a bit arrogant actually, but it's okay. He's on our side. So it's a very good introduction. I mean, there are lots and lots of others. Then you want to read the original source. I can't decide which is better. One is under the Oxford World Classics, which cheap printing, you may say. It's a very good series. I can't decide between this and the other one by Penguin, McInerney, because they're very different approaches. McInerney, the Penguin edition is bigger, so you got more stuff and more arranged in terms of the original works and then chronologically. So it's more comprehensive. This one is more topical in a sense. Is if you want to see how Thomas Aquinas, what he has to say in terms of the specific topics, this is very helpful, and it has more helpful notes as well. So they're two quite different. So you can not buy both. You're not buying the original. You're not buying the whole Summa, right? Summa Theologia or Summa Contra Gentilis. Okay. So I thought I'd just recommend these two small books. Now this is the last class for the moment. I will do what I can, and then when we resume it sometime next year, what I'm going to do is probably I will introduce you to the early modern philosophical revolution, beginning with Descartes. By right, I should go Descartes from the so-called rationalist side to John Locke, and then to Kant. But because of time shortage, I will just jump from Descartes, who represents that revolution in philosophizing. Locke, I just leave him for the time being. Spinoza, Locke, I won't touch them. Then I go to Kant, because after these two, I want to introduce you to a critique of modern philosophy. And for years, I struggled to find an alternative to modern philosophy, which by all accounts seems to be very hostile to the possibility, very, very difficult, very inimical to the work of metaphysics, much less Christian metaphysics. There seems no way out. You are locked in by Kant, and even though Hegel went after Kant, he's still locked in the human consciousness. It seems to be the case. He seems to talk about panentheistic God, or is he talking about just the consciousness of the mind? You decide. But then I think a good way to critique modern philosophy is to go back medieval, but by its modern examples, to French Catholic philosophers, Etienne Gilson, and Jacques Maritain. I think we need to give a critique of modern philosophy that will carve out space for us for doing metaphysics or Christian metaphysics. So that will be the next round. So anything more, the short course is going to handle. So we do what we can, but in order to do a critique of that, we must have some foundations. That's where I went from Plato to Aristotle to Augustine and Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas. So you need to have these concepts in order to use them for a critique of modern consciousness, modern epistemology. So that's where we hope to be able to do something. And for today, The last week I ended with essence and existence, the difference between them, and how God is pure actuality. For whom there's no distinction between essence and existence. For all other finite creatures, there is the distinction, although inseparability. And for finite creatures, they exist insofar as they are acted upon by an efficient cause, by God. That is to say, insofar as they participate in the existence conveyed to them by this efficient cause called God, for whom there is no difference between existence and essence. Okay, that's what we did. Then suppose I've do a little bit on the proof for the existence of God. I mean, you will have taught the moment you do Thomas Aquinas, you will do that. You do all the apologetic class, you will do something similar. So I will reserve it to the last bit. If you have time, I'll just introduce you to the structure of the proof, but we won't have time to go into detail because what I'm interested for today, want to focus is on the Thomas Aquinas philosophical anthropology, because I want to use that as a foundation for our future critique, so to say. Okay, now I should do maximum actually F5. Really F5? Not yet, huh? But okay, yeah, this is better. Okay, so I will deal on human nature and power. I think it's okay.
This one is.
Yeah, it's a little bit loose, I notice. No signal, you will search for signal.
There.
Okay. Must handle gingerly with care. Can I put like that some more? Okay. And then okay lah, let it be lah, huh? Okay. Searching sources, no signal. Okay, looks good. Function F5. Okay, yeah. Just for so what I want to do is to deal a little bit on his understanding of the soul, the power of the soul, and then move on to his psychology of cognition and knowledge. Because the moment you move into modern philosophy has shifted from metaphysics to epistemology. We don't belong to that, but you need the metaphysical foundation to mount a critique of modern epistemology. So we try to understand a little bit about the soul, and then the power and the cognition of the soul. So basically, Thomas Aquinas, let me see, understanding of the soul follows the Greek Aristotelian heritage, which is hylomorphism, form matter. Last month I said highly, I find it appearing, but more and more I read, it's still back to hylomorphism. I keep on to that. In adopting this approach, he is essentially avoiding two extremes. Two other alternatives, so people will call them extreme, Platonism or materialism. In Platonism, a human being is identical to the soul. What defines a human being is the soul. The soul is an immaterial substance. The body has no role in defining what the person really is. Okay? Human being is identical with soul. There is an immaterial substance. The body of a person is no part of him. So we kind of have gone through that. On the one hand, Thomas Aquinas agrees with Plato that we are identical to the material part of us, but he would not dichotomize the spiritual part, the form part, from the physical part either. So he is Aristotelian in the sense, but he does agree with Plato that there is a transcendent soul, which Aristotle would not accept. On the other hand, he also would reject the materialism position, contemporary materialism, for example, where nowadays this phrase used is physicalist, non-reductive physicalism. Okay, it's getting more complicated amongst. It has become fashionable for many Christian theologians nowadays to deny the soul as we traditionally understand. Anti-right, following others, presented a paper in the Evangelical Philosophical Society, maybe more than 10 years ago, where he rejects all this understanding of the soul, or the soul goes to heaven, because this is Greek heritage. What does he actually believe in? You have to ask him, okay? He always is good at criticizing the others, but when it comes to his own position on this thing, he gives you a 10 minutes answer that has no substance. But you should take note of that. In fact, I might want to write something on that one. Who knows? So anyway, the modern position is that all material substances are composed of they are composed of merely matter. Okay? This one, everybody, you died, everything breaks, decomposes, that's all. So where does Aquinas stand on this? All material substances are composed of prime matter and substantial form. In other words, he's Aristotelian, and then what constitutes the form is the soul, and that is immaterial. Okay? Okay. Now, how does he elaborate on this? Let's go into it. You will be surprised that while Thomas Aquinas talks about, can't decide whether they call him Thomas Aquinas, by then he'll be Thomas from Aquinas, but everybody calls him Aquinas. Okay. To him, everything got soul, every living thing, plants, animals. He said, oh, okay, I thought only human beings got soul. You know, so that part we have to shift a bit from the more Platonic section. Okay. So let's begin with observations as a good Aristotelian. Thomas Aquinas will have been dependent on Aristotle book De Anima, on the soul. Okay, you will find it cheaply available everywhere. Begin the observation that plants grow, they reproduce. Plants grow. Okay, no S. I might as well correct it now. Oops. Plant grow, they might reproduce and die. So that's common knowledge. Animals seems to have more than that, and that is they have basic perception and they have mobility, so you have higher powers, so to say. And then when it comes to human beings, they got even higher perceptions. Actually, we got perception-wise, animals are better than us, huh? I mean, higher perceptions in terms, higher cognitive powers, let's just say that, higher intellectual power, higher perception. That's not the right word. With what perceptions human beings? We are better than the amoeba for sure. In some areas, meaning we have more complicated perceptions. It's like intellectual when we appreciate music and animals don't appreciate music. We are more sophisticated in how we discern some of these senses, you may want to say. But it's more intellection, I think. So, okay, I will qualify. So human beings have got higher powers like intellectual activities. But regardless, all of them are, you may say, self-moving, self-directed. And not only self-directed, but they can be goal-directed, okay? Do plants have directions? Well, any living things is whatever conserve energy for its growth and reproduction. That is minimum, I would say. So they seem to have some purposive and intrinsic ends. The plant is to reproduce. Okay, that's what you may say. Now, looking at these three classes of living beings: plants, animals, and human, and the different range of activities. In that sense, you may say, you can argue, there seems to be a hierarchy of sophistication. And by the same token, you may say that if soul is what moves all these animals, and therefore all living creatures have souls, and that is they move towards and it can be self-moving, so to say, self-motion, that is directional behavior. So, well, in that sense, there is a hierarchy of sophistication and power. Okay, so but all living creatures have soul. So you now have to ask, what do you mean all living creatures have soul? Well, let me go a bit further first. What is the difference between living and non-living things? Well, when I say living things are self-directed, they're immanent within itself, immanent causation. It begins to remain within the agent and typically involve the fulfillment and perfection of the cause. There is that self-direction towards and fulfillment, so to say. This is in contrast to non-living thing transient external effect. So, for example, between an animal and a coffee machine, you say, oh, the coffee machine nowadays, I can program it so that 7 o'clock in the morning, the machine will turn on, and then it will automatically, this one must cost 50,000 ringgit like that, not your 7,000, 10,000 ringgit machine. It can be time programmable, and then when I come down, after my alarm clock rings, I got this hot coffee all ready for me. There is a purpose, but the difference is that the coffee machine must still rely on some external initiative, whereas my little dog pet, it won't prepare food for me, but it will know how to go and get its own food when it needs food. Okay. So basically, there's the difference between the coffee machine. One is internal initiative, and the other one requires an external input. So a living thing can undertake activity that is perfective of it and furthers its own good, while non-living things cannot do it. So yes, we have complex machines that can be programmed for specific functions, but nonetheless, within these limited functions, we still recognize that it is not self-directing, it is artifact, rather an artifact, a composite of parts of substance, in contrast to living beings. So Aquinas will say that it is clear when you look at living beings especially, it is a sum of its parts, but the sum is more, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. We used to say that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Because complex system actually Prigogine already years ago got a Nobel Prize in biochemistry when he argued that complex system can generate, higher system of information by themselves. But in this case here, it's about, that one is biochemical reaction, way back in the 70s. So Prigogine, P-R-I-G-O-G-I-N-E, okay. Then, but Aquinas claimed that properties of living system transcend or outstrip the properties of elements composing those systems. I always tell my students when I was teaching, how much do you think your body is worth? 70% calcium carbonate, right? Your bones or something like that, A bit of phosphorus thrown in, a bit of nitrogen. What else?
Fossil fuel.
No, I mean, talking about the body part, water. Oh, sorry. Water is 60%, 70% water. And then calcium carbonate, your bones thrown in. Even in this time of inflation, if I buy all those parts, $20, I think I can buy all the parts already, If the shop cells this lah. But obviously the human being is not just, not even just a complex biochemical, it's not just a sum of inert parts, there's something that a human being exhibits that transcends all the properties of these parts, you may want to say. What is the source of this transcendent activities? By transcendent, I don't mean going to God, that goes beyond is essential parts, you may want to say. Because something inside configures the parts and directs it for its purposes. And traditionally, that's called the soul, okay? There is a living force that can gel all this together and move it, sustain it, and move in a certain direction. So therefore, to the extent not only human beings, but animals and plants exhibit these qualities, they have soul. And the word used is animate, to be ensouled. Okay, they all living creatures are animate, meaning ensoul. Anima from the Latin word for soul. All living beings are ensouled, and that is animate. But in order not to be confused, we can fine-tune it based on the observed activities. Okay, so in the medieval Aristotelian medieval usage, plants have vegetative soul, and then animals have sensitive senses, sensory perception. Animals have sensitive soul, humans have rational soul. Okay? Now, of course, the human can have some of the functions of the plants and the animals. Does that mean the human being got 3 souls? Because he exhibit this range comprising the 3 areas? No, you may want to say that human beings have only 1 soul that can encapsulate all the subsidiary functions, you may want to say. Okay, so this is what we have. So animals have soul, sensitive soul, but only the human being possesses the rational soul. Okay, let me expand further. This is from Shield Pasnau on philosophy of Aquinas. It's an analytical text, so a little bit more demanding than the other text, I want to say, in terms of analysis. He says a human being is human insofar as he is rational. Therefore, a rational soul is the essential form of a human being. Meaning, a human being, you got the physical part, form, matter. You see a human being, the matter part, but there is an essential form. An essential form is, I think I may put somewhere, is contrasted with an accidental form. Accidental qualities. The human can have tall, short, color, so things like that. That this accidental form may or may not exist, but the essential form will be self-subsistent. Self-subsistent means, it's subsistent, not self-subsistent. It is subsist by God's power. Okay, it is subsistent, meaning it can exist on its own. So therefore, so rational soul is the essential form of the human being. Now a soul is some particular thing and subsists on its own per se, because it operates on its own. For the action of the understanding, then this is quoting Aquinas, Question on Truth. For the action of understanding does not take place through the bodily organ, therefore the human soul is both some particular thing and a form. What is stated here is that, well, first of all, let me check. Okay, human beings have a rational soul that can exist on its own in that sense, and not only that, it exhibits functions that are not restricted or tied to or reduced to the bodily activities, the bodily organs. You exhibit rational thoughts, analysis, emotions. Am I emotions? Yeah, okay, emotive part of the soul, emotions. that you don't identify with, it's not reduced to the activities of the bodily organ. Although we say, I love you with all my heart, or that is not that's a different metaphorical usage. And because these crucial activities of the soul is immaterial, one can therefore argue that the soul itself is immaterial, even though it can be connected to the bodily form. It can even have experienced restrictions because of its bodily limits, you want to say, okay? So I'm building up the case. I find the more interesting part is when I deal with cognition, because that one is the most important part. So Thomas Aquinas says, what makes human being unique is in the intellect. Intellection is an operation of the soul not conducted in common with the body. Somebody can be, especially with aging people, before you have dementia, of course. Some of us are increasingly aware that our bodily decay is getting more and more out of control. But you know, I have friends who, before they died, the body all wasted away, but the mind is still as sharp as ever until the end process of death. But the mind can still be very sharp, bedridden, cannot eat properly, everything, you know. So in that sense, the intellect can be, in fact, can be compromised by bodily limitation, but it is also, in its own way, different from the body. When you emphasize the difference, does that make you sound like Plato? And therefore, the body, in some sense, is a prisoner of the body. No, the soul is in some sense a prisoner of the body. Is that correct? I think in some sense, yes, you recognize that. And when somebody dies, you say the person has returned to the Lord. For us as Christians, Aristotle wouldn't say this kind of thing, but Aquinas will say that, will accept that, with a little bit of difference. So the human soul organizes every part of the body, specifying its function, directing its function, defining its function rather, and sustaining its identity over time. You are the same person you were 2 years ago, or maybe you're going to be the same person 20 years later, but your bodily cells will have been died and replaced already, basically. But you have a certain continuity, identity over time. That's what makes a person, identity over time. And that is in contrast with the corpse. The corpse is an ex-human body, which somehow we know is different from us, and left a bit further will decompose. So what sustains it is function, and what gives it identity, or self-identity, if I may say, you understand who you are, and there is something that is different and outlasts your physical existence. Now, that's why I say in biblical theology in the early 20th century onwards, in reaction to the traditional Greek anthropology and systematic theology, we talk about a tripartite human being, body, soul, and spirit. It's true. We go back to the Old Testament and we study words like nephesh, or soma, nephesh, soma. Suke would be Greek already. What's the Hebrew word? When I first studied when I first read the book Anthropology of the Old Testament, the name was just here and then slipped my mind. There were about 8 meanings to the word nephesh alone, you know, in the Hebrew word. Okay, so you get all confused because you've been trained to tripartite human being, you know. Each of which actually look at the human being from a certain holistic perspective. The words in the Old Testament are holistic. It's not that human beings divided into 3 parts. So because of that, you got this reaction, you know, Numa, Suke, also is holistic, it's not parts of this. So to ask are we tripartite sometimes can be misleading to us. That's why I said there was a reaction against this, and just look at holism with no distinction. How do you maintain body, soul, and spirit distinctive? What you call substance dualism, and having holism at the same time. There was the dirty word to say, oh, you are guilty of substance dualism when you believe body, so you're a Cartesian, you know, from Descartes. But I think I will defend substance dualism. You can have property dualism, all kinds of philosophical models. But I think I will, and I should write something on to defend substance holism. The only trouble is nobody in Malaysia is championing anti-right on his denial of the soul. He denied heaven, that we go to heaven. So he sounds like Jehovah's Witness to me. See, this biblical scholar, they think by just limiting themselves to biblical language, they have answered everything, but they actually ignore other equally important questions. What happens when I die? Who is this person who meets God? You know, or is in the presence of God? He never answered all these questions. So he thinks, well, I got my answer already. There's no soul. You know? So the point is that there is something in us that survives death. There's something in us that sustains our identity and survives death. The body can decompose. But if we go along with the biblical testimony, something in us survives death. What is that? Okay? So I got no chance to ask NTU. I was supposed to be part of his team in 2009, you know. I got a research grant somewhere, but things, my son got sick, so God had deemed it not good for me to spend 1 year in a team with NTU, right? I might have converted to him by then, you know. So, or quarrel with him, you know. So, no chance to ask him the question. So, that's what it is. But interestingly, as much as the soul is different from the human body, the soul, I put here, is parasitic of human bodies for their identity. I think the point is when we look at a person, you identify, for us from this point of view, for example, if the soul is the essence, the form, when we talk about trees in general and these three, why? Because that form is combined with the matter, this particular matter. I said earlier, the matter is the principle of individuation. Become individuation. Okay. So the matter itself is the principle of individuation. It gives you the individual visibility on earth, the identity. So same thing, but what about the tree? What about this dog, Fido, in contrast of dogginess? It's because it's this dog in front of me, because it is combined with matter. So the human soul is, from our human perspective, parasitic on human bodies for the identity. Your body depends on your soul for its existence through time. That's fine. I think that's fine. Okay, I think I'll have a next slide which tries to repeat. Because this concept is only, I'll have 2 or 3 slides that actually rephrase the same thought. Here and there, you'll find. For Aquinas, the soul and body are distinguishable, but they are incomplete substances because by themselves, you don't get the person. But together they form one substance, the human being. Here we go a little bit tricky. The body without soul is strictly not a body at all. Yeah. It's an aggregate of parts which disintegrates at death. Hard. So that's fine. If the link between the body and soul is so essential, what happens to the soul when the person dies? Now here is a huge debate between scholars. What actually is Thomas Aquinas' position? If the soul has to be linked to the body for its identity, and when you die there's no more body, what is this soul? Good question. So, the human soul which survives death is strictly speaking not a human person. when it is in the state of separation from the body. Because, based on his premises, the person signifies a complete substance of rational soul. So what happens when we die? Do we go back to God? When incoming dies, does he go back to God? So again, what is the nature of the intermediate state? Now we've gone to theology. Are you going to soul sleep, so to say? Well, I know it's not very much of this, but I would say that if I die and then nothing else, soul sleep, whatever, why did Paul say that he can't decide whether to be with the Philippians or to die, but he longs to be with Christ, which is far better? It has to be better than just some ethereal, spiritual zombie existence, you know, and not just physical zombie you watch in Hollywood movie, spiritual zombie. But then, Book of Revelation chapter 7, John saw the multitudes and he asked, where do they come from? They came from the tribulation. These were the martyrs, you know, and then they were given robes washed in the blood of the Lamb, you know, and then they continue their praise and so on. Or in 2 Corinthians 5 is another part, so classic passage. So I would say that based on these biblical hints that we have, we will be in the presence of God, just like Stephen, when he was stoned to death, Jesus received my spirit. So we'll be in the presence of God. We haven't quite received our resurrected, our glorified body in the second resurrection. So we have some kind of provisional existence, provisional blessedness, I'll put it that way. Provisional blessedness in the presence of God, clothed in robe. You know, I think it's interesting. I have tried to find, I always write that I always find commentators say, you know, to the Hebrews, body without soul is like nakedness. What you say, oh, sorry, I forgot the word bazaar in the Old Testament. I was trying to say nephesh bazaar. Okay. So, it's nakedness without body, nakedness and shame, you know. But nobody has pointed to me any real text, chapter and verse in the classical Jewish text. I'm still looking for that for all these years. But it will be horrible to talk about when we die, we're just souls and no body, you know. So that's at least consistent with our Christian position. We're in provisional blessedness and presence of God until we receive the glorified body in the second resurrection. Now, if you follow Aquinas, you're not a person because you don't have matter. You don't have this basis for individuation. Now, here I'm going beyond philosophy, I'm going beyond theology. But I would think that what you and I are unable to identify individually, God can recognize you and confers you that identity of who you are at that stage when you are in His presence. Now, this is purely theological belief, extrapolation. So that's my view, you know. Nobody has discussed it as far as I'm concerned, but just my own projection. So you are still a person in the presence of God. Otherwise, how would Peter have recognized Moses and Elijah? Okay? There is and so I think maybe Aquinas got a little bit too modest in this stage. Okay, but this is an area which you have to take into account. So he still, the soul he has this very, very you may say very nuanced approach. I remember once challenging my friend in a small seminar. I said, but Aristotle is that was about 10 years ago. Aristotle is Aquinas is an Aristotelian. Why you talk about the soul the way he talks about Plato? I think he look at me and both of us pretend we know the answer, we don't know the answer, both of us pretend that we are not ignorant, you know. He's one of the bright fellows around, by the way, outside Malaysia. He's a bright fellow. So we are both equally ignorant and we are both equally good in hiding our ignorance. So, but okay, so now back to this, I repeat. So the soul is back to it. So Aquinas, for sure, the soul continues is a subsisting form. Not only that, it's configuring. This one, I got this word from Stump, S-T-U-M-P, Eleanor Stump and Stressman, the big book on Aquinas. The soul is what configures the matter, using a modern language. Then Aquinas could be an emergentist. Emergentism has become quite a popular position over the last 20 years because you don't want to be Platonic and you also don't want to be materialist, because you recognize the human soul may be a combination of parts, complicated, but yet it has new properties that emerge by virtue of its complex combination and structure. So the word used is emergent, something emerge. It's a little bit a clever word to hide our ignorance at one level. Why do birds normally fly south when winter is coming? Instinct. Instinct means we don't know, but it's a nice word, instinct, So when I read, I say emergentist. Oh, so we don't know, but it's very clever. But we say, okay, something emerged from there. But it's a very popular system in the last 20 years. Haskell, one of them. System of sufficient complexity begin to exhibit properties and disposition that cannot be derived in any direct way from the properties emerged by the individual components of the system. Or the soul moving the body is, we say they are called actualizer is another word. I just don't know because I like the word actualize, the potential of the complex system. I got this word from Stump also, TMP. Souls are forms, but not just any form. They are essential forms versus accidental form. Moreover, souls are those essential forms whose activities are actualizers, and they cannot be captured in reductive terms. By reductive terms, you mean when you talk about science, nothing but atoms and molecules. You are nothing but complex biochemical reaction. Everything is reduced to material categories and properties. But the soul, in its ability to configure you and actualize new properties that cannot be reduced to material compositions. That's what it is. That's what I told you. I try to have some repetition. So I got this from the internet. Now the good thing is, I say, I want a chart. I'm hopeless when it comes to tables and charts. Okay, I think propositionally. I got a friend who ultimately thinks in terms of charts and tables. I've seen two of my friends. They're very smart people, but we operate differently. So some people dream in color. Do you dream in color? You do, you see how deprived you fellas are. I have somebody who close your eyes and then got movie, the movie kind of images unfold. I close my eyes, I get blank. That's why I don't see vision like a charismatic. And I always tell my charismatic friend, when I close my eyes, I see vision that must be from God. Okay, I only think propositionally. Okay, so got a chart here. You can go back and look basically just to map out the various dimensions of the activities of the soul. There has on the left hand side spiritual, can see I don't know whether you can see that. Spiritual and bodily, and then you have from the bottom of the next category, vegetative, sensitive, and rational. That's what I talk about. And then the cognitive dimension, the appetite, your desires, okay, your rationality and your desires, okay. So desire is a big word in literary criticism the last 30 years, man. Everything is desire, from Hegel. So from the bottom here, the hierarchy of activities, the cognitive dimension, sight, hearing, memory, estimative, imaginative, common sense. Common sense, I will explain in a moment, is not your common sense. Common sense is a different use. Reason. Then locomotive, irascible means anger, those emotions. Concupiscence means what? Calvin always uses the word concupiscence, right? Lustful stuff or greed or whatever. And so yeah, and then okay, you go back and then you study carefully what I have on this because I want to move on. Any question up to now?
The question of participation, where does it play? What part does it play in the form?
The what?
Participation.
Yeah.
How does it fit into the whole?
Basically, what we are saying is that we do not possess this quality on our own. But to the extent that contingent beings like us continue to have a share, continue this act of existence. Existence is being in act. It's an act of existence. Where does this come from? It comes from an efficient cause. Something must move us. I mean, this use medieval language, or to put in more contemporary operational God impart to us this principle of life and existence. So we participate in that sense.
Participation is on the forms, right?
Yeah. Okay. We receive our souls from God. That's the way you might want to use the language.
You mean to say that there is actually a form of the soul in that sense, and we participate in the sort of like a way soul?
Oh, no. In fact, Thomas Aquinas wrote one whole book against Eros on the unity of the intellect, that some of these Arabic philosophers became influential in Paris and adopting that we are individuals because of the body, but the soul is kind of one divine soul that we have. No, it doesn't.
Because that's what Plato would be talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Plato would also be talking along the line. A kind of a world soul, but in this hierarchy, this is a very strange concept, I want to say.
But Aquinas would be different from what the Platonic conception of participation.
Yes, from that kind of, but participation is a very big subject itself. I have not really studied in great detail. I'm just using what tradition has been, but I know it's a very big philosophical topic.
So this radical orthodoxy philosophy in Cambridge.
Yes.
Yeah, actually talking about that a lot.
Yeah, we don't have the bias. I don't know why you want to spend so much time reading the radical orthodoxy. You can't write in simple English. Yeah, have you tried reading Weng and all that stuff? Pistok, Catherine Pistok. Why can't they write in clear language? I don't understand. Why are we giving them so much time? Sometimes,
Because they wouldn't get paid for that.
Actually, they're very smart fellows, but they only talk among the immortals. Mortals like us cannot understand what. But anyway, back to this. Participation has also become very popular among the Pauline scholars who influenced by deification kind. I think it's more from the deification Eastern Orthodox, and they want to separate themselves from this Reformation understanding of justification. So so that's another debate on participation, so to say. We talk about union with Christ. We keep to the more Pauline language rather than just participation in the philosophical categories. Now, okay, let's carry on. Okay, because after the cognition, if got time, I want to deal with analogy, language, analogical language, which is a big issue in philosophy. But for the time being, let's talk about Aquinas on cognition language. If you wonder why I'm giving time to this, I want to repeat. I want to lay the foundation to critique contemporary philosophy in this epistemology. Because over the years, I couldn't find any alternative to critique it. Now, as a recap, when you talk about epistemology, usually there is that opposing paradigm being offered, rationalism and empiricism. Usually for rationalism, there are innate ideas that are inborn in us. We only need to rediscover them. The senses are poor, unreliable means to knowledge, and the most reliable means to gain knowledge and truth is via a priori reason, and introspection. A priori means before something. Opposite of that is a posteriori, before experience and after experience, okay? And the left-hand side, the representative philosophers, Plato, Augustine, although Augustine also give recognition to our experience as a source of knowledge. Anselm, Descartes, Spinoza, for sure, Leibniz, sure, okay? I like this, by the way. I want to spend a lot more time studying him. Empiricism, on the other hand, says that no innate ideas. We are born tabula rasa, blank tablets, like John Locke, and experience and society writes on these blank tablets of our minds. The senses are reliable, indeed the only means to knowledge. Then say a priori reasoning is fine as far as it goes, but it is very limited as to what it can provide us in way of knowledge. We want to know what is why look at the baby. If it's a priori reasoning, that's all we get from the baby, right? Baby talk and noise. But to the extent a child grows, a human grows, it is exposed to more experiences that form the basis of knowledge. Then knowledge comes through observation and experience, or experience and observation, either way. And the philosopher representative, Aristotle, Aquinas, okay, Aquinas will talk about experience is the beginning of knowledge, but he's not restricted to that. In a way, Kant, all knowledge begins with sensation. But sensation has to be processed further. He's not restricted to sensation. So there's a big debate whether Kant is an empiricist or an actually the word rationalist, or rational empiricism. Stuart Hackett, interesting philosopher in Trinity Chicago days, argued for rational empiricism in his book, The Resurrection of Theism, which Bill Craig said that was the book that actually changed his life. The Resurrection of Theism, okay, Stuart Hackett. John Locke, Berkeley, I don't know what's the right pronunciation, then David Hume. But I think while most philosophy books will contrast rationalism and empiricism, I think for our purpose, I think it's better to contrast between realism and idealism. Idealism says there is no, realism means there's something real out there, independent of our existence. Idealism will say no, everything is the construct of the mind. Okay, that's what it is. The famous story about whether the stone, whether when the tree falls down, in the younger-in-law body perceive it was the tree real there. Of course, then you hear a voice from heaven, no man have seen it, but I have seen the tree, so it's real there, okay? Something like that. Or is the stone there because I kick it? No, because as Form 6, we play these kind of games. Form 6 pseudo-philosophers. What do Form 6 students nowadays do? Play computer games, right? I think so. And they don't talk this kind of issue like these pseudo-philosophers used to do. Okay. So basically, okay, we are going to talk metaphysics. I want to go back to metaphysics. I don't want to be locked into epistemology, because epistemology is very much a modern obsession. Modern obsession with epistemology is there because it has lost, it gives no room for metaphysics. Metaphysics to us should ground knowledge rather than knowledge grounding metaphysics. You approach it wrongly, then you will reach a dead end. So basically, talks about so who are the realists? Who are the idealists? Idealism will be indirect realism. Okay, I will take that. Meaning, despite the fact we have no immediate knowledge of what is there, if something is there, okay? That will be Kant in a way, okay? Phenomenology, yeah, okay, I'm willing to give that as well. So, from Descartes to Kant, okay? The primary object of perception are not things external to the mind, but sense data. So basically, all the big discussion, Descartes and Kant, is not about the thing out there, but whatever sensation pops up in our mind or comes in our mind, and then our mind will configure them anyway, categorize and configure them any way we want. So we are all the time, we're not dealing with the table, the chair in itself, but the chair as it appears to us in our minds. That's what it is, okay? So the science data are just the, you may say, the messenger or the bridge that stands between us and the physical objects. If you deny that they are physical objects, then you are an idealist. But you say it's there, but we can't quite reach it. So the science data, then you are indirect realist, so to say. That to me is the background. Then direct realism, we say, oh, the things are there that appear to us are really there. When I sit on the chair, I'm really sitting on the chair. Okay? I always quote when I write on the problem of evil, you know, these limericks. There is a faith healer from real who say, though pain isn't real, but when I sit on the pain, I dislike what I fancy I feel, you know. I used to read all this stuff. Like, there's a young lady from Niger who smiles as she rides on the tiger. They came back from the ride with the lady inside and the smile on the face of the tiger, you know. Limericks, AABBA, yeah? So quite fun, you know, this very English thing. So, direct realism is there. Whatever what can be perceived is potentially such that the object of sense is actually what we see. So so what I'm going to do next is to spell out how Aquinas is a realist and what a realist theory of cognition and knowledge is in general. You want to do it in 1 hour? I say, man, you're all genius. We do what we can today. Now, I will go give you the general picture, then I go to the details. General picture will be two types. One is all these I just do it from the internet lah. So the cognitive process is, on the left hand side you have the real world. Okay, this is okay. I am. You got the real world. Okay. You got the real world outside, matter and shape. Then whatever it sends out signals, information is received by the sense organ, the 5 senses, I guess, that produce the sensation. The sensation is transmitted to the brain, where there's a transformation, conversion of sensual impression into intellectual cognition, brain power, and then cognitive object. Now, this process is sometimes called faculty psychology, which identifies between our minds are different faculties with their operations that contribute to our knowledge of the external world. And I sense that contemporary philosophers and scientists poo-poo on this thing called faculty psychology. I read the review on Paul Helm on the wheel and said, oh, he operates a faculty psychology. You know, it's a kind of a this word lah, huh? Oh, we got neuroscience nowadays, you know. And somebody I know from Malaysia always talk about neuroscience as though it has explained away the soul, you know. I think we have great advances in neuroscience that seem to correlate certain perception and mental activities of certain parts of the brain. That correlation is astounding, that we can map the conscious mind. Is it the brain or the mind? Okay, is it the brain or the mind? The two different things. I asked the neurosurgeon, what do you do? He said, I operate on the brain. He never said operate in the mind. Okay, but I have not gone to neuroscience. I'm not sure whether I need to go into it. I know this is the new big sense, big kid in the block, you want to say, as though we're going to answer, we don't need to talk about the soul anymore. To me, two things. The instruments that we use, there's no such thing called uninterpreted data. It's not as though when we look at the images on the screen, this actually we see the brain function, but these are all pixels sent out by certain algorithms. These are still interpreted data. It's not real raw data. And secondly, I always use the phrase causation is not correlation. Just because something appears together doesn't mean that it's the same causation. You know, my favorite analogy, I drink whiskey and water, I get drunk. I drink beer and water, I get drunk. I drink brandy and water, I get drunk. I drink vodka and water, I get drunk. What's the common element? Water. So water caused my drunkenness, okay? So correlation is not causation, okay? But this one here, the cognitive process, you would say, is not what the modern people, modern scientists are favorable towards. But just operate on that, just be aware of that, okay? So then, when we go to Thomas Aquinas, you got something big now. You can read. Okay. So, I think the only problem is on the third column in the bridge there, phantasm. There's something very blur there. Is that one is called the first blur one. I can't go for okay. This one. Okay, is potentially intelligible. This is what we call potentially intelligible, and this one here is actually intelligible. Okay, okay. This in case I give you the slides. You might have problem. I hope you can see on the slide. Okay, same thing as the earlier model. Except now, this thing is now given more distinctive terminology. So you got the five senses integrated in the common sense. Common means all this integrated together. Common, not you got no common sense. It's not there, but it's what is shared in common. What is combined in common? Common sense. Okay. Then you have so it's the Gestalt. If you the word Gestalt psychology, how your perception holistic, not the parts. You suddenly see a pattern holistically. You see they talk about the ugly woman or the beautiful woman, the jug or the if it's not the jug, it's the two human faces or something like that. So you Gestalt psychology, okay. So then when it goes to it goes to process further under phantasm or imagination. Phantasm or imagination on top. Okay. So you have memory, imagination, cogitation. Never mind, we will spread this out. Then more important, on the right hand side, you have agent intellect and possible intellect. Active intellect and passive intellect. So when I first read this stuff, I said, very hard to understand all these things because these are artificial terms at one level. Whether you accept this explanatory model depends on your own sense, whether it is consistent, whether it explains various aspects of our perception or knowledge, whether it's consistent with other forms, other aspects of knowledge that you deem elsewhere. In a sense, this is part of the worldview, part of your paradigm, whether you accept it or not. Okay. Now, is Thomas Aquinas and the medievals justified in compartmentalizing our perception this way? Okay. Now, Eleanor Stump, big book on. Oh yeah, there is a video YouTube by Eleanor Stump on Aquinas on knowledge, where he gives a 5 minutes explanation, which is very good. I think go into it. Eleanor, E-L-E-O-N-O-R-E, Eleanor Stump, S-T-U-M-P, Aquinas on knowledge and perception, something like that. It's a 5 minutes YouTube where he explained this. Where in the light of our contemporary knowledge, some human beings suffer from two kinds of defects. One is called blind sight. Blind sight meaning a person has this fully functioning set of eyes. Nothing wrong with the eyes whatsoever. Nothing wrong with the eyes, okay? But you hold something in front of the person just can't get what you're talking about. What is this? No. Meaning, as far as the eye is concerned, the person is correctly receiving all the stimuli, but somehow is unable to process the visual data. The person just doesn't see this thing. It's not as though your eyes are spoiled. So blind sight is a defect. Then the other one is agnosia, meaning the person indicate that he or she is aware of something in front of him or her, but somehow cannot make sense of whatever this is. Oliver Sacks, very famous neuroscientist, the man who thought his wife is a hat, right? His book used to be fully cheaply available in big bookshop, cheap. So classic work on modern neuroscience of sort. So he sees the wife is a hat or something, whatever. The wife. So the person has no categories to make sense of what is visually perceived. So in that sense, it gives us a clue that the stimuli received to us, we say, oh, hit the retina, but what is it? It requires further processing, so to say. So for Aquinas, all human beings are equipped with a variety of sensory powers. So there is the external senses that we receive from sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But there is something internal in us that has to come into the picture to process what we have received. So what is it that has to set in motion in order that we actually finally see something? Now, of course, both the physical and the internal processes have to be in sync with one another for knowledge to be achieved. I think I read somewhere, Aquinas say, for example, a person who got a sick tongue cannot taste properly, so the physical organ facilitates the sensory process that will be further processed by the mind, intellect, but nonetheless, defective organ would place limitation to our perception, sensory perception. Now, so there is that link, and yet he makes a distinction. The distinction here being that, okay, so let me see if I have here, okay. Oh, he says here, a sick person's tongue, for instance, infected with a jaundice and bitter humor. Humor means the liquid. We got bowel. The 4 humor in us in those days. If your humors are unbalanced, then you fall sick. The black bowel and the violet bowel and blood and one more thing water maybe, I don't know. So in the old days, when you say you are a humorous person, that means your humor are out of order. You are cranky and slightly off person. Now we say humorous means fun person to be with. See, nice means stupid in the old days. The word nice, you're nice. When they say some centuries ago, if I say you're a nice person, I mean to say you're a stupid person. Language change. So anyway, so he says here, a sick person tongue, for instance, infected with a jaundice and bitter humor cannot perceive anything sweet, Okay, so he gives this example. But on the other hand, beyond this close connection, there is a difference between our intellect and what is perceived, so to say. Meaning, the sensory powers are obviously localized and particular, but our intellect operates with universal categories. We discern essence, so to say, form and essence. And if the intellect is merely physical, then we shouldn't be able to operate with these universal categories. So, being able to transcend, go beyond the corporeal, physical, therefore, you can say that the intellect must be incorporeal and cannot be, cannot be reduced, I will use the reduced to a corporeal organ. Let me go next step. There are 3 processes involved in terms of cognition. This one I'm relying basically on by Aquinas by Frederick Copleston, okay? Copleston, who famously debated with Bertrand Russell on his book rather than the 8-volume philosophy book. So the first stage in acquisition knowledge is sense perception. Our organs of senses are affected by external objects and we receive sense impressions, okay, so far. The process of sensation cannot, however, be reduced to mere physical change. If physiological change suffice for sensation, all natural bodies will have sensation when they underwent change. I mean, if everything is physical, so to say, something in us must also be changing physically lah. Our minds, our brains must be changing physically, which doesn't seem to be the case. Nonetheless, so you want to say, something is received when stimuli comes from the physical object. So sensation, in a sense, is psycho-physical process in which a sensible form is received. What is this sensible form? A form, under inverted comma, something is received from the senses, so to say. Okay, let's go to Copleston, page 179, the Pelican book. Then, something actually a little bit more. You notice in the description, the perception, sense perception comes to the mind. And then, here is an interesting statement. The mind's sensory power, so the mind is receiving, is acted on by what affects it. I have highlighted the word acted on. Highlighted the word acted on because it is the mind that receives the species. The species will be the form, so to say, without matter. The form without matter, okay? The particular form without matter. It receives form without matter, okay. I emphasize the word acted on because in this pre-modern epistemology is the sensation, the object sending sensation that acts on the mind. The mind is affected. In the modern epistemology, basically Descartes say, I think, therefore I am. The ego is stripped of all connections and think of itself. The ego is cut off from the world, and first he cuts off the world the ego from the world, and then only he tries to build a bridge to the world. Whereas in the pre-modern epistemology, there is no gap. Sensation is genuinely received and is acting upon the mind. So in the modern one is the ego, I think, and then try to reason its way outward. It is what they call constructive epistemology. It's all the construction of the mind, so, which is different. So that, I think, is a very crucial difference between pre-modern and modern epistemology. And so, a sensible form or species, a special species is the form of matter or composite, is a configural state that is now received by the mind, or you may call a sensible species. Now, these are technical words that keeps cropping up when you read the medieval Aristotelian epistemology. It's something, so sensation is received and internalized. That's what it is. Now, what is this internalization process? So the second part is, okay, sense impression is now received. Now, this is an explanatory model. I mean, this is not real modern psychology where you actually can take photograph, of what you are talking about, okay? Sense impressions are synthesized by the interior senses and conserve the form received by the senses. So basically, earlier in the photo, okay, let me go back to this. Okay, on the second, on this part now, okay? So it's now, we're tracking the second part, how these sensations are being internal conserved, okay? Now, what the mind receives is phantasm, the form of the matter. We don't receive the matter remains outside, but we receive the form of the matter, okay? And then the interior senses distinguishes, collates the data of the various external senses into its general common sense. This is a common sense, okay? The gestalt, you see a poisonous snake, okay? Okay, let's see. You're not only just seeing this long creature, but you see a poisonous, a snake, or rather a snake, basically a snake. So it compares the distinguishes qualities like taste, shape. Then, or you see a mango, it's the same mango. How do you know that it's not just a shape of green, but it's mango? How do you know when it's yellow, it's sweet, when it's green? Some mangoes are also sweet when they're green nowadays. But general association. So basically, it is able to combine these senses into a common object, you may want to say. It distinguishes real object from fantasy and dreams, okay? So this is called, in other words, the senses are now collated, brought together in common. He adds on more to it, say that he tries to fine-tune the process because we have different powers of cognition at this stage. The estimative power by which an animal perceives certain cognition instinctively. For example, a dog senses this human is friendly or hostile. Some dogs can only see hostile people. They just bark when you come into their gates, okay? By the way, dogs reflect the owners, right? If I keep a dog, my dog will bite one, which doesn't tell good about me. I think so. If I keep a dog, my dog will bite one. So I'm not that friendly after all. A sheep's cognition that the wolf is an enemy. No, it's not like the wolf, oh, enemy, you know, the kind of signal come along, no, but somehow there is a power of estimation. He doesn't want to use a judgment because judgment is reserved for a later process. And then the sheep can also, I mean, the sheep can remember, or sheep, same thing, not just the dog, the sheep can say, the wolf is an enemy, run, you know. So, and sometimes we also act instinctively based on memory. So we act in response to the stimuli in front of us, stimulus in front of us. We also act as we recall from our memory. So that's fine. Now, it should be noted that while the perceiver, the dog or the human, collates this thing, this is not a very deliberate process. Synthesis takes place at the level of sensitive life, though not necessarily conscious or deliberate. Okay? When we go through the whole thing, then you see that sometimes you don't see the whole, when you don't see the whole, you don't understand the process when you don't see the whole, so to say. Let's get on first. Then sensation here, let me just, okay. So sense impression here must be synthesized, you may want to say. So next step is, okay, how beyond the common sense, what's the next step in process, in synthesizing, okay? So Aquinas postulate that we have this interior sense in us, which works out this synthesis, and then what that means is the sensation now gives rise to imagination. Now, be specific, don't, that these are contextual terminology, okay? Okay. So, the visual, auditory, gustatory, tactile, olfactory perceptions we have are recalled in mental images or phantasm, as Aquinas calls them. Okay, so taking note that these are all, interestingly, these are not physical, so to say. They are mental images. Interestingly, the imagination, it says here, so the phantasm cannot reduce intellect to, okay, he would later, I mean, his view would be against the later view like Berkeley, who reduced intellect to imagination. We just construct. When I say constructive epistemology, that's our own imaginative activity. That will be Berkeley. Interestingly, he says imagination has to do with bodily and singular things only. At this stage, when we receive the phantasm, the image of the dog, you notice when I see a dog, I don't say, oh, dogginess, see the form, the universal form. No, I say, see Fido. You see, it's always about the particular individual. At this stage, the sensation has always to do with bodily and singular things. But at the same time, we don't just see Fido, we see a dog. A dog, we see Peter and John. We don't see a human being. We see Peter and we see John, but we also see human beings. So basically, there is that singular perception of the singular. There is an awareness of the universal. So, and what graphs the universal? It will be the intellect. You know what is a triangle? You see a triangle. You don't just see a triangle. You don't just see a square, a rectangle. You don't just see four sides. You also see a rectangle. You see, I see two rectangles. Okay, two rectangles. There's something individual and something universal in two of them. And that one has to be. So what Aquinas say that universal part, the intellect, is not restricted to material. For example, a triangle you can envisage, a pentagon you can envisage, hexagon you can envisage, a chiliagon. Chiliism is millennialism, 1,000. Can you imagine a chiliagon? I don't think I can imagine that. Can you imagine?
It looks like a circle.
Not so fast. Only 1,000. Okay. So an infinite polygon would be a circle. Approach a circle. An infinite polygon would be approaching a circle at the limits. So there is something universal. We can understand the universal concept of form of a chiliagon, even though we don't quite grasp it individually. I would put it that way. So now, there are also other matters that we perceive, law, love, they are abstractions, but we can also understand them. So from triangle to chiliagon to love, or something like that. So, okay, so basically that's what, so then repeat again. Let me just repeat. As I said, there are 2 or 3 slides where I try to really describe the thing from a slightly different angle using different words. The visual perception of the cat is the mental image, but all such images of phantasm are, as we have said, particular or individual, just as the original perceptions and things perceived were, and as such they are not intelligible. That is to say, they are not the sort of thing the intellect can grasp. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that the intellect grasps the universal, but the phantasm is particular and individual. So that's the distinction we keep at the moment. So from the sensory perception, common sense, we grasp the individual form. How do you grasp the universal form? So what you have here is, let me read. So there is now what Aquinas to talk about the active intellect. Active means it's acting lah. Passive means it's not. The active intellect causes the phantasm received from the senses to become actually intelligible by a process of abstraction. So, just now that I pointed to the potentially intelligible. So there is an abstraction process. It strips away all particularizing or individualizing features of a phantasm so as to produce a truly universal concept of intelligible species. Okay? Leaving you, for example, with the idea not just of this or that particular cat, but of catness in general, of that which is common to all cats. The abstract concept is then stored in the passive or possible intellect. So basically earlier I do the complicated diagram. So there is a further next step in the processing where what is particular is now stripped of all the particular qualities. What is left is the intelligible species in the universal form, so to say. So that we understand that it's not just Fido, it's also a dog. Not just dog, but also a dog. Okay, but then but this is the processing. It has to be terminate somewhere. So the mind stores it in the possible intellect. So basically, you have to get to understand. You even read common sense realism. Also talks about active intellect, possible intellect. So it was how it was used until Descartes comes along. I mean, or rather, read is post Descartes. He's critiquing Hume and Descartes actually. So, okay, let me go on further and then you ask question. Third step is transition from sensitive to rational and intellectual cognition. The senses apprehend particular objects, images, even if confused, are particular. The mind, however, has universal concepts. It apprehends abstraction in the form of things. I'm just repeating in different words, so trying to drill it in. Then, put it in other words, the senses provide the intellect with basic raw materials under inverted comma. For higher level cognitive activity, sense impressions are synthesized in the form of the image, the phantasm, and from there we get Peter, the individual, as a man, and therefore also James and John. Then this is received. This is transformed by the active intellect through the abstraction. So here's interesting. The universal concept is primarily the modification of the intellect by which a thing is known according to its form and essence. So what is stressed here again is even in the active intellect. Basically, I have to admit, on first reading of Aquinas, Aristotle, the mind takes on the form. The mind doesn't construct the form. The mind receives the form. The mind becomes the form. I mean, I have to take it as some kind of metaphorical connect, not the real physical. So here another way saying the universal concept is the modification of the intellect. Just think, by contrast to contemporary epistemology, the mind constructs. No, here the mind receives. There's a modification of the mind, so to say. Okay, so.
Sorry, in other words, you see the particular first, and then only you come to.
It's imprinted in your mind. I put it that way, lah. There's a modern language, lah. But you're trying to stick to the original language in a very confusing way, lah. But to make it in our modern language, you say it's imprinted in us, lah. We take on that form, so to say.
What would you say the difference is between the Aquinas' sort of passive intellect and the modern concept of like the subconscious, where psychologically, where memories are imprinted, and therefore we sort of react subconsciously to things based on what maybe our active intellect would have perceived?
Basically, at one level, it's apple and oranges, lah.
Yeah.
But at another level, I haven't reached the stage of the passive intellect yet.
Yeah.
So what the active intellect has transposed is then now deposited in the passive intellect.
Yeah.
So that's the terminal process. But if you keep that in mind, okay, let me just go to the next line, then I'll answer your question. The active intellect actualizes cognitive objects, that is, it abstracts the intelligible species from the phantasm and deposit them in the passive part of the intellect. or the potential intellect, or the possible intellect. Possible meaning because that part of intellect can become all forms. It can receive all forms. So it is possible to do anything. That's I'm trying to understand. Now, you have the conscious and the unconscious in the Freudian psychology. So our experiences, normally we process it in the conscious level. But in his psychotherapy, he has discovered there is a sub-region, the subconscious, which for a variety of reasons, the brain decides to push it down to the level. Very often, these are what you call, what's the word? The word is repression. Unhappy memories, whatever, we press down and think we are done with it. But unfortunately, now and then it surfaces. And that's uncontrollable, it's neurosis in that sense. We use the phrase, some of us, the way we deal with a problem, we're actually not dealing with it, we are pressing the balloon. It just reappears in another part of the balloon, you know. Now, the reason I say that is apple or oranges because two separate dynamics at work. So it will be wrong to connect. But on the other hand, if we say that there is a sub-region of sort that can receive and the forms and also can recall them, in a sense, all our intellectual processes is not like step 1, step 2, step 3. It's an automatic process in many ways, you know. So, subconscious, conscious,
we access, memories that we have, processes that we have constructed that are not.
But the difference really is that passive intellect, very often we actively recall them. But it's the subconscious, we don't quite actively recall them. And that's the difference there. The subconscious actually is powerfully influencing our consciousness. In fact, it's powerful, and that's the whole point of psychotherapy, to bring it to the surface. We need to find ways to bring it to the surface because we cannot consciously bring it to the surface. So that's the difference. But it's the passive intellect, we can recall them. Okay, if you want to overcome some of your repressions that so here's the man to talk to, okay? He'll charge you cheap. Now, he basically adds on further, the intelligible species is transformed into what you call the inner word of the concept. There is conscious awareness of the quiddity or the essence of what has been cognized, such that the quiddity is recognized as corresponding to a word called bird. The resulting quiddity is received in the possible intellect. So I'm basically repeating this thing now. I keep on repeating because it's all new to us. In other words, the sensitive apprehension of the particular leads to the abstraction, intellectual connection of the universal concept. So far, we're basically dealing with the processing of the senses and the intellectual impression. So far, that's what it is. For our purpose, we basically say, okay, we have an idea roughly how this is going. But there are more to come actually. Okay, so summarize. There are 4 stages involved. I put 3 earlier. That's what Hoplaston was discussing. The reception of the sensible species, the stimuli of the senses, then transform into phantasm, images in the imagination. Look at the chart I gave you earlier. I'll send you the later. Then the abstraction of the intelligible species, and then it is not yet knowledge until the intellect actually acts on it. It's called intentions. So I have no here abstraction, not cutting off the intellect from senses, but the mind knows only its own ideas. Meaning, the mind takes on the form of what has been received and processed. And so the mind can only know what it is. It can only know what is in it, basically. So it has to take on the form in order to recognize and know the form. That's what it says. Now, 2 things. If you are aware of modern philosophy, You say, what's the difference? You see, basically, we say John Locke, whatever, we have impressions received, we have what they call a representation. There's a we don't actually see the chair, but the representation of the chair in our mind, which we process. So we are only seeing sense data. We're not seeing the chair itself. We're only receiving data. And so when the mind processes it, we only know this data, and if we are Kant, we say we impose our categories to organize it. The mind must operate with certain categories, universal categories, from Aristotle to Kant. And only because we apply the categories to shape this data, we make sense of the data. Sense without conception, sensation without conception is meaningless. Conception without sensation is emptiness, something like that. Or long ago, Vasily read a book on science. It's not just that we draw the patterns from our observation, but the mind imposes the pattern onto our observation. Now, this is modern philosophy. You say, what's the difference? Isn't it the same thing when Aquinas talk about sense data, sensory perception comes in, processed in the phantasm, and abstraction? What's the difference? That's why earlier there was a phrase, abstraction is not cutting the intellect from the senses, but it's part of the process whereby the mind forms the ideas that it will conform with what it affirms. Now, so I have here, there seem to be two things. There is the subjective representation, the cat, the triangle in my mind, and then the external object, the actual cat and triangle. So the question is how one connects and represents the other. And then what is here, this one I got from Fisher, the book Fisher. What you perceive really is for the modern people, what we perceive are only mental representation. Modern philosophy, we got a mental representation that we have imposed the form on it in a constructive way. But what he says here is, what you perceive really is the cat itself, not just the representation of the cat, which is so, and not the representation which is merely that by which you perceive the cat, in the sense of being the medium through which perception takes place. I have to masticulate this. Say, basically, I again repeat, modern one say we only see representation. The Aquinas says no, these images are like glasses, so to say. I still see the cat through this medium. I still see the cat. You are thinking about cat themselves, not your concept of them. So that's why I emphasize so much on the science data acting upon the mind, rather than the mind creating images, representation. There's a difference. Now it's very important, we put this up between idealism and realism. Realism will say if it's all is in the mind, nothing out there really. Or Kant famously would say, we only have phenomenal knowledge of the thing, but we do not know the noumenal, the thing in itself. What do you say? Okay, sure. Ding anshik. Okay, sure. The thing in itself. Okay. You in order to impress people at cocktail parties, you must learn a few of these German words. What is your Weltanschauung? You know, just my worldview. You know, and then just say ontogeny, recapitulate phylogeny. Oh, you know, that is to summarize evolution theory lah. Then you get your contract. You know. No lah. People look at me and say, this guy doesn't know anything. He only knows all up here, doesn't know the real things of life. But impress people lah. That's the whole point. So basically, what Fisher says, there is just one thing. A form which exists in two ways, an entitative way, in this case as instantiated in matter, so as to comprise with it a material object, and an intentional way, that is the intellect focus on what it has been acted upon. The same form exists both in intellect and in the outside world. Now I have to say that you're obviously going to operate on two paradigms. If somebody insists that I want to follow the modern Cartesian paradigm, these are just another words, empty words lah. Basically, it's like empty words lah. You have to recognize that. We are now going to operate on two paradigms. If you take this particular philosophy, you won't get your job in the university. Maybe only if they have medieval philosophy lah. But if you talk Confucian and Upanishad, you can get a job. But not if you talk about Christian epistemology. That's the difference. Okay. So Aquinas says the intellect sees the universal existing in the particular. Sometimes we dichotomize the universal and the particular, but it looks like in this case you have the concrete particular, you might want to say. Concrete particular, concrete universal. That's a very Hegelian term. Apprehending universal in this way is the first operation of the intellect. So far, all that I have been talking about, from the sense data coming to the intellect, processing it, active intellect, and depositing in the passive intellect, which can recollect this. Basically, we stop this. I got no time to go further. There is a second operation, which is that the final stage has to be the mind making a judgment about what has been received. This is something called the second operation, which the mind describe its knowledge in the form of proposition. It's called judgment. The process of judgment is a process of compounding and dividing. It's not judgment in the court sense. Like this is the mind making its final judgment about what has been perceived. So therefore, truth and falsity are predicated primarily neither in sense impression nor of concepts. So sense impression processed into concepts. There's another similar word, the intelligible. The concepts are intelligible, the same. And then, but in the judgment. And so, truth and something therefore I always confused when I first read all this stuff. Truth is adequation, the yellow line. Truth is adequation, conformity between the intellect and its object. When there is a conformity, a congruence between the intellect and the object, then it's something real and true, so to say. So here, basically, Koplaston put, truth is defined as conformity between the mind and the thing. The mind can know its own conformity with an intelligible thing, not simply by apprehending its essence, but it makes a judgment about the thing. It first knows and then declares truth. It is in the mind's judgment that truth is found, and not in sensation, nor in the intellectual apprehension of an essence. Truth is primarily found in the mind's act of judging. So you digest all these things. And that part, on the second operation, we are not dealing at all with it. Just to know, I want to get you initiated into this new understanding of how cognition takes place. From cognition, next is judgment. So on this one, I'll stop here. Because the next one, this one, I don't think I'll have time. I just put there. I didn't have time to deal with. Okay, I think I better. Did I deal with argument for existence of God? Last round? No, Okay. Analogy one, you just receive it as bonus notes from when I send you the thing. But to me, are words univocal or equivocal? Okay. God taught like this way. I got univocal, equivocal. Aquinas says analogical, somewhere in between. So what I actually have later, I have this description, and then this one I did some notes on Norman Geisler, Philosophy of Religion, and then this one from E.L. Mascow, to be very interesting Anglican philosopher many years ago. He was formative in my initial journey. Okay. But this one is right, but let me go to just a few more minutes. I will go to this one. Okay, this one, few more minutes. Thomas Aquinas is famous for his 5 ways of so-called ways to God. Are they persuasion or proof? And philosophers have found many reasons to disagree with Thomas Aquinas if this is all there is to it. We forgot that Thomas Aquinas wrote his book as a handbook for beginners. For beginners, our graduate students cannot handle it. John Calvin institutes also for beginners. I mean, we think we are superior to older people, or ancient people. But these are for beginners, you know. I'm pretty sure half, 3/4 of MBS and STM students cannot handle the Summa. Okay. So he has given these 5 ways. He says the first way God is a prime mover. Mover here, motion, like here. How come? I think I'll close this other one first. Maybe it will help. Suddenly, I have to use page up and down. So for example, argument from prime mover. All bodies are either potentially in motion or actually in motion. I think we get tripped when we read motion as movement. Whereas this motion means change from potentiality to actuality. That's why I say I spend some time on potentiality and actuality, because without them you're going to miss what Thomas Aquinas is trying to say. So this was in the earlier slide I gave to you all, right? I think I gave to you all. You go back and look at it. So basically it's the 5 ways. God is the prime mover, God is the first cause, God is the necessary being, God is the absolute being, God is the grand designer. Now they have a certain pattern. Each argument begins with some characteristics of being, change, causality, contingency, perfection, and then argues to a first cause, efficient cause. So it's like some dependent beings exist. All dependent beings must have a cause for their dependent existence, and there's the next word I want to explain. An infinite regress of existential dependent causes is impossible. Therefore, there must be a first uncaused cause of existence of every dependent being. This independent being we know as God. But I'm now spruce it up a bit to say I am because at the end of the day, God as pure activity, pure existence. One may argue he drew inspiration, or we can connect it to God's declaration, I am that I am. I'll be where I will be. So now, basically, to put it in a more contemporary form, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events. It's not. Is it events that causes things or agents? That's a different thing. So anyway, we move the time. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm here. Something is happening now. It must be a preceding causation, causal agent, preceding causal agent. So the argument is we move backwards in our explanation in this series, assuming this is a linear horizontal series. It's not linear horizontal, but for simplicity. Then we say it must go to a first cause. It must end in the first cause. It cannot go into infinite regress. What is infinite regress? It cannot go. You know why? Assuming this, if indeed something happening now depends on something back. If you say that it goes on to infinity, then nothing can traverse an actual infinite. The word used, you read Bill Craig's book on arguments for God. Actual infinite and the potential infinite. In terms of actual, nothing can, if it has been in the infinite past, nothing can cross the infinite path. If it goes on infinity, we will never have what is in front of us, which is something actual. The fact that there's something actual means that that it has to be something that begins the whole process sometime in the, there cannot be infinite regress, and therefore there must be one uncaused cause that initiate this chain of causal events, so to say. So that's the word infinite regress. You have to sit down and think, why cannot? Because if I go back to infinity, it will never have traced back this way to the present event. So there must be a first cause that begins the process. Although, of course, God actually doesn't just stop at the beginning and let the dominoes fall. God is actually actively sustaining the causation process from above, if I want to put it that way. Okay, so just to say the word infinite regress, I have to explain to you. My favorite argument is argument from contingency. Things are contingent, meaning that they can be and cannot be. They appear and disappear. But you cannot have everything. Is impossible. Number 4 here. Assuming that everything is contingent. Number 3. It's impossible for contingent which always exist. For that which cannot be at some time is not. Putting 3 and 4. At one time there was nothing. But that nothing. If you take this two statement, one of them say that if everything is contingent, there was a time there was nothing, because everything contingent is not the case. You had nothing, but nothing cannot come from nothing, and therefore there must be an actual thing that starts this thing called contingent existing. You may want to say. So now, in all these arguments, there is sometimes what is called the fallacy of composition. And I'll give an example. Every club member has a car. Therefore, the club has a car. Just because the individual parts have a cause doesn't mean the whole thing has a cause. But then the counter argument, look at all the bricks, every brick is red in color, but therefore the wall is also red in color. So that's why I personally say that a lot of these logical arguments have what you call unexpressed premises. If A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. It sounds so neat, but actually, if you read philosophers of religion, how they debate, they give a counter logical argument and a counter logical argument, but each one is logical, but you look carefully, they're all working on different premises. That's why these clever people can never agree with one another, because they don't spell out exactly where the differences are in the hidden premises. So anyway, I'm just saying that, so these are nice debate points. That's one. Second thing is, that's why I said, that's why there is this restatement in the modern form. This one is from Richard Taylor, about metaphysics, Richard Taylor. If something exists, there must exist what it takes for the thing to exist. The universe, now you put it in more modern form. I'm going beyond Aquinas now. The collection of beings in time and space exists. That one is given. Therefore, there must exist what it takes for the universe to exist. But what it takes for the universe to exist cannot exist within the universe or be bounded by space and time. I mean, Aquinas wouldn't have thought like that. Therefore, what it takes for the universe to exist must transcend both space and time. You can argue for a big being, great being, but it doesn't mean to say it is the infinite God, one and only. That one requires further argumentation. Why is it you can only have one perfect infinite being? So, I mean, I don't have a chart here. I used to show my student. If I have this object here, it has A to Z. But let's say it hasn't got Z. If it hasn't got Z, what distinguishes it from another being, assuming that, is it has Z, but this hasn't got Z. This has also other qualities as in addition to Z, but it may not have something that the first one has. That's why there are two different identities. But in presenting two different objects by virtue of something not found in one of them, is in other words saying that each of them hasn't got what is perfect. Perfection means it must have everything. And if you have everything, you cannot have something that also have everything because it will be identical. That's why there has to be only one perfect God. That's my argument. Okay? I was pleasantly surprised when I was explaining to some students in 1990. Oh yeah, I got this answer. Okay. So this is what you have. So the word, the general structure of the argument, infinite regress, what a restatement amounts to, and then infinite regress is just be aware that in contemporary apologetics there is the use of potential infinite and actual infinite. We can have potential infinites, but we cannot have actual infinite. And William Craig has some good analogies. Hilbert Hotel. You go and Google Hilbert Hotel. When we talk about actual infinite, a hotel that has infinite rooms, so it leads to contradictions. Now imagine the hotel is actually infinite rooms, and the guest came, and then the clerk said, "Sorry, every room is filled. But don't worry, I will move guests from all the odd number rooms to the... No, I just moved the whole set one step to the right. Oh, now there is one extra room already. So the guests can come into this hotel, which was originally filled, infinite hotel. Then more and more guests come. So what shall I do? Very simple. I move all the odd number rooms to the even number rooms. So so now I have all the additional rooms in between. So how can something be infinite and all full, and yet you can bring more? So I'm just saying this Hilbert Hotel is very interesting. Although I always say when we sing perfect, yet if feel like my flow was fuller every day, perfect and yet if I mean that's hymn we sing, right? When I sang that I said, okay, interesting. So Hilbert Hotel and infinites, actual and potential infinites. So because it's very crucial in contemporary debate on the infinite regress. Okay, so I don't think I will, but at the end of the day, I'll just say with all these arguments between, you read the debate between Copleston and Russell, it's available in the internet, the transcript. When about this, Padunra just say, as far as I'm concerned, the universe is all that's there. That's it. All the arguments. So Copleston said, well, if somebody refuses to play the game, there's no way you can have a checkmate lah. There's another way to reverse argument. Is called Moore-Shift, M-O-O-R-E-S-H-I-F-T. All these arguments can be reversed the other ways to say there's no God. It's just a logical inversion. Okay, that one day when we deal with apologetics, I think I have to stop here now. If you question, any question? So just to recap, congratulate one another for having persevered to the end. You are truly the company of the saints who persevere. You are true Calvinists. So that's for sure. Then secondly, I sometimes fear when I introduce these classes that in presenting to you these ancient talks, the question in your mind might be, what relevance these things do have for us? Actually, in philosophy and literature and even theology, at the end of the day, it's always going back to grapple with a few classics. For some reason, the few classics have this inexhaustible source of insights. The rest are all paraphrases, but some classics are real classics. So we always go back to the philosophical classics and rework them. And then thirdly, although what is presented to you may not seem immediately relevant, the whole point about critique is to be able to step outside the circle. If you are locked into the modern mindset, there's no way you can critique the modern mindset. And if you believe old doesn't mean outdated, chronological snobbery, that's what C.S. Lewis uses the phrase, chronological snobbery. Actually, in the last 40 years, there have been some interesting rediscovery of medieval logic and philosophy that became a pleasant surprise to many philosophers today. That the medieval logicians were basically very sophisticated logicians, and there are similarities in the kind of analytical treatment of theology and philosophy between modern and medieval. So the whole point is it gives you access to an intellectual apparatus which we hope we can use to critique modern knowledge, which for some reasons is hostile to metaphysics and God. So when you study Kant, I just don't know how I can bring in Christianity. He brings into the moral argument, which freedom and necessity, moral freedom versus physical necessity. But it's what they call exchanging pottage for what? What's the word there? Stew for pottage or something like that. So it's like that. So I hope more than that it will get you interested, and then hopefully the more you read, you'll find that even the way we can bring categories and how they operate in the way we do theology also coming. Because before that we Protestants, we got we don't want Aristotle because Martin Luther says such terrible things about Aristotle, We Protestants also talk about Aristotelian philosophy, and the Roman Catholics have their infusion of grace and all those habituation of virtue rather than the Holy Spirit sanctification and all this stuff. So, and then Francis Xavier gave such terrible press to the other philosophers, which I think he was terribly wrong in all these issues. His strengths are slightly different. So we have to recognize where we come from, and I hope you have a new interest to equip yourself, because if you want to deal with the learned people outside the church in this country, our cousins, you don't know philosophy, you can't reach them. They are light years ahead of our Christians. Okay, anything else? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we praise you that you are the God of all wisdom and perfection. And in finding you, we find salvation and also satisfaction to all that we have desire. And also in being saved by you, we also have found in you truly the answers to all the questions we have. Lord, give us the intellectual desire, give us the hunger for you and all that you have created. Let us be Christians who, because we have such inquisitive minds, because we are not satisfied with just we have that, we are interesting witnesses for you. So Lord, by your grace, help us grow and learn. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.